Once upon a time, there was a village called Zabrody on the side of this swamp. Old people said that at the beginning of the 20th century, people lived here. Not many. I yeah, many. No more than 100 souls, but they lived. The houses stood on piles because the ground under their feet vibrated as if someone was breathing under it. They said that the village was built right above an ancient pagan temple where sacrifices were made to a swamp goddess named Churila. No one knew whether she was a woman or an animal, but the people feared and respected her. The first disappearances began after the Great Patriotic War. People returned from the war, bringing home medals and curses, and children began to disappear in Zabrody. No one knew who or what was behind it. One grandfather, nicknamed Mychurin, said that in every drop of swamp water there is an eye, and if you drink, you give yourself away. In 1956, the village disappeared. Not just died out, disappeared. In the morning it was there, in the evening, gone. All that remained was a lowland, unstable soil and fog. The last person to see Zabrody was the surveyor pilot Savelyev. He flew over the area and saw houses, as if painted on the water, and then they crumbled like ashes. Savelyev died in a mental hospital 2 years later, shouting at night, Churila, Churila. Since then, people have avoided these places. The swamp grew like a tumor, squeezing out animals, covering the earth with rotting breath. Scientists from Novosibirsk tried to study it in the 70s. They disappeared. The last entry, she is under the roots, she is watching. 2023. The swamp has become a trend among diggers and bloggers. 5 people, 3 guys, 2 girls, decided to make a video. They said that all this was just fairy tales. They found a boat covered in moss, a doll with twisted joints, and a well. One of them, Rick, went down, didn't come back. The others waited. Then they saw a video. A silhouette flashed below, as if assembled from roots and bones. The girl Lara fainted. She came to, didn't remember anyone. She only whispered, Churila. The camera, found later, ended strangely. The swamp begins to bubble. The last frame, an eye, enormous, looking into the lens. Then, darkness. Now this place is listed on maps as a high humidity zone, but if you look closely, there is a silhouette in the swamp mirror, changing, but alive, waiting. If you look into the swamp for a long time, it looks back. First warmth, then heaviness, then a name. And you are no longer you, you are Zabrody, you are Churila, and no one will hear you calling for help, because there is always silence hanging over the swamp. 2 years have passed. A new researcher, Professor Gleb Anatolievich Vereskov, a professor of folklore and ethnography, has collected archives, deciphered audio recordings, and found evidence of disappearances. He was not interested in blogger hype, only the truth. He believed that something ancient and pagan was hidden in the swamps, and he wanted to prove it scientifically. He arrived alone. He stopped in the nearest village, Gnilushki. The locals flatly refused to talk to him, and one old woman, seeing a map with a swamp mark, spat on the floor and whispered, "Don't come back." But Vereskov was stubborn. He took with him only a voice recorder, a flashlight, a backpack with provisions, and a thermos with tea. He walked to the center of the swamp for 3 days. On the 4th day, he found a boat, an old rotten one, exactly the same one that the bloggers had filmed. At night in a tent, he was awakened by a sound. Someone was scratching at the fabric, as if with claws. He stuck his head out. No one. Only traces remained in the grass. Not legs, not paws, not hooves. Circles, as if someone was crawling, huge, shapeless. The next morning, the swamp spoke. Pulsating soil, a rumble from the depths, the smell of iron and dampness. He reached the well. It was open, a hole in the ground without a bottom. Vereskov launched a probe with a camera into it. The image first showed the walls, then organic matter. Layers, as if it was passing through the womb of a living creature. Then the camera turned off. When he tried to pull out the probe, the cable was cut. The cut was not even, but as if chewed. He spent the night without sleep, surrounded by a choral whisper in which he heard ancient words. He wrote in his diary, "She is not a spirit. She is not a goddess. She is memory. She eats those who remember. I have learned too much." The next morning they found only the tape recorder. The last entry, "I saw her. She is not below. She is everywhere. The roots are her hands. The water is her flesh. The air is her breath. The fords have not disappeared. They live in her. And now I am a part of..." The recording ends with a sound like a splash and breathing. Since then, no one has tried to go there. The swamp is bigger now. It is growing, and a voice can already be heard in it, calling by name. Maybe yours. 6 months have passed. A young graduate student named Ilian spoke at a scientific conference in Tver. He talked about the connection between Slavic myths and geopathogenic zones, and he just mentioned Zabrody. The audience began to make noise, like stop telling stories, and he took out a flash drive and said, "And you listen." The recording contained a fragment of Professor Vereskov's dictaphone, only not the one in the archive. No one had heard this one before. Vereskov's voice trembled. "She wants to go out, but she can't. Names are needed, memory is needed, recognition is needed. If someone says her name with faith, she will appear." Then a wheeze, and then a voice that was no longer his. "Deep as a cave and wet as mud. Ilian." There was silence in the hall, as if the oxygen had been turned off. Ilian turned pale. He didn't know that the recording would end with his name. The next day they found him in a hotel by the window. He was looking into the fog and whispering one word. Pulsating. Pulsating. Meanwhile, the first fences appeared near the swamp. Not security ones, but research ones. Satellites recorded strange activity. Mosses were moving like blood through veins. Scientists from Moscow sent a drone. It flew for exactly 3 minutes and turned off. In one of the frames, before it turned off, there was a silhouette. Human, but as if assembled from peat, bones, and bird feathers. They nicknamed him the Swamp Shepherd. He appeared in all subsequent photos, but never in the center of the frame. Always in the background, always watching, and then the letters started coming. Real paper, with seals, dirty fingerprints, the smell of mold. Inside were pages from the diaries of people who were no longer there. One letter arrived in Ilian's office. It contained a photograph, children standing on stilts. Behind them was a woman. But if you look closely, her face was not a face. There were eyes, many. One was human. The rest were made of water. On the back of the photo was written, "If you see, she sees you." In March, the swamp went beyond the map, literally. On the new satellites, it occupied an area larger than officially indicated. But in reality, everything was the same. Fog, bushes, moss. Only the people who lived nearby began to leave or disappear. Houses were found empty, no signs of a struggle, only dirt on the floor and footprints in circles. And in each room, the sound of dripping, as if water was leaking from under the floor. A new expedition was being prepared in the spring of 2025. It was financed by a private investor, a gentleman from Austria, a collector of folklore and ancient relics. His name was Dietrich von Grass. He believed that there was an ancient entity under the swamp that could change the course of history. The expedition consisted of 9 people. They entered the swamp on April 1st. On April 2nd, the connection was lost. On April 5th, the locals saw one person coming out of the fog along the highway. A girl. Her clothes were torn. She was barefoot, covered in swamp slime. Her eyes were empty. She said, "They gave us a name. Now she has a voice. And this is only the beginning."
If you enjoy my videos, subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any new uploads.